Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another webinar here with Itential. My name is Peter Spragata. I'm currently the Vice President of Product Management here at Itential, and looking forward to spending some time with you and kind of talking about scalable enterprise network automation. Today, I'm going to be joined by a good friend of mine, Rich Martin. Rich, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you, Peter?
I'm fantastic, fantastic. You
Awesome.
want to introduce yourself real
Yeah,
quick?
absolutely. So I'm the senior technical marketing engineer, probably uh, chief demo guy. How about that?
Chief demo guy. That sounds much more exciting than technical marketing thingy. Yeah, I agree. I like that.
So that'll be my big part of this session is putting into practice what we talk about.
That's fantastic. So yeah. So and kind of in that vein. Well, gosh, what are we talking about today? Well, today we're going to talk about how organizations really work to achieve scalable enterprise automation. It's one thing to be able to automate things. It's another thing to be able to automate a network, but it's yet a third thing and a fairly big jump to go from automating a network to being able to do it at enterprise scale. And so today we want to spend a little bit of time talking about kind of how our customers have been going through that journey and what we've seen and how that's all really how leveraging the Itential product portfolio has really allowed them to achieve network automation at scale, really across the entire organization. So to get us started, it really kind of starts around the idea that kind of what's all about our DNA, and that is we're really striving to try and make both network and cloud automation simplified, full running at scale. We believe that individual engineering teams and operations teams really need access to tools, technologies, and platforms that help them to automate in their infrastructure. And that's a big goal of ours, and it's really kind of the foundation by which we build our entire product suite around. But to get started, we really got to think about what is the operational environment today. It used to be really simple. Rich, you probably remember the days, right? It was really simple. We just had routers and switches,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Some CLI commands, right?
Yep.
Not a problem. For old timers like me, y'all remember Perl with the Telnet library, and
Wow.
you were off and running with automation. Sprinkling a little rancid in there for backup, you were good to go, right? It's all
Yeah.
you needed in the world.
Well, the world was much smaller back then, for sure.
It was indeed. It was indeed. The reality is that's no longer true. And network teams are being asked to do so much more, and they're asked to do so much more with such diverse technologies. It's not just about CLI enabled devices anymore. It's not as simple as screen scraping a telnet or an SSH. Hopefully, we're not doing telnet anymore. An SSH session and achieving automation that way. We're now being asked to interface with Wi-Fi systems and SD-WAN systems and cloud systems and SDN infrastructures, and they all bring with them challenges of different operational paradigms, right? Different ways of working with them. Whether it's automating your Wi-Fi system that you have deployed in your enterprise campus, or it's automating connectivity to public cloud infrastructure in a way that you can quickly, efficiently, and securely turn up, whether it's branch offices or even individual user connectivity. It's really automation that's driving the ability for organizations to be able to do this in a fast and efficient way. The challenge, though, of course, is having to deal with the plethora of systems that are out there. I now have to be it seems like nowadays I have to be an expert in CLI config, right? And even that's not, even that is, I've got different types of CLIs out there, right? Whether I'm
Yeah.
talking about, of course, Cisco iOS style or Juno style or whatever style. So I got different CLIs I've got to learn, and now I've got to learn how to interface with controllers and APIs and JSON configs, and it's a lot. It's a lot to try and keep track of and try and make sense out of. I think kind of piling on to top of that is that there is a massive amount of back office systems that I've got to integrate with. And so my day literally becomes, I think I could do this. I think I could actually have a desk with, I could have a 360-degree desk with a monitor all around. I can just kind of go in a circle and swivel from desktop to desktop, each one,
Yeah, well,
optimized
that's
to
that's
configure a
one way
different
to
tool.
optimize your swivel chairing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
May
Right.
not be the best
Right.
way, Peter.
Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe there's a better way to do this. Well, let's see if we can't come up with something a little bit better. And that's really what we're all about at Itential, right? We're really trying to focus on how we operationalize network automation within the enterprise at scale, and that's what it's all about. And it has to start with, just like a good network has to start with, the concept of design. We need to design our automation. It cannot be an afterthought anymore. Organizations can't afford to allow it to be an afterthought anymore. We have to take the time to sit down and design, and more importantly in the network space, we want to be able to design it with tools that make sense and are accessible to our engineers. So many network professionals I've spoken with over the last few years, talk to me about the frustration of, I don't want to learn coding. In fact, I purposely got into networking because I didn't want to be, a developer my entire life.
Right.
And so, that's really kind of the starting point. We've got to have tools and technologies, and we're going to go through some of that today and show you what that really looks like. Those, as we design those automations, right, we really want to focus on, of course, pushing configuration, because that's what it's all about, right? It's all about pushing configuration in a way that doesn't involve a human to have to click on keys, click on screens, do things manually, because we all understand. And I think that this is maybe the most undebated point anymore around network automation. That is, manual operations are prone to error. That's just the reality of it. There's no sugarcoating it. There's no getting around it. We have to get off of the keyboards. We have to get off of the web consoles. We have to get off of the GUI interfaces, and we really want to leverage automation to do it, because we can start now to think about, and we can start to design automation that represents the things that we want to do, and then let software go to work for us, and that frees us up to really focus on more high value tasks. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So once we've configured the network, it becomes incumbent, though, that pushing configuration, or shall I say, the act of automating is not enough anymore. We have to be able to validate that config so that we can start to enforce standards across the enterprise. Whether that is, starting with a brownfield network and backing into a quote unquote golden config, or it's starting with the concept of a golden config with a greenfield deployment and enforcing standards from day one. It's absolutely a necessity that we can not just configure, but we can also validate that configuration. And of course, as we go through the process of validating, we have to be able to remediate the changes. We have to be able to understand where we've got those gaps between what we want and what's deployed, and how do we go out and fix it. Whether that's, a missed line in a config, or that's someone decided to manually make a change of device, we've got to be able to remediate that, and that remediation flows right back into the design cycle, and around we go. But when we're out talking with organizations today, and I see this a lot when I speak with different enterprises. I don't know, Rich, if you run into this a lot, but I know I do. In terms of, the concept of a change seems to be very isolated today. It's isolated around this idea that I'm automating the execution of the change. In other words, put it more simply, all I'm doing is push config out. That's my automation day, and that's not a bad place to be, but I think it can be more. And I think that's what we really want to explore today. And that's how we get to a scalable enterprise automation play around the Itential tool set. Because the problem is that when you are doing changes in isolation, what happens is it's not just one team, it's not just two teams, it's every team. Every team starts to choose their tooling and choose how they want to go about doing things. Whether it's the core team that may have decided, hey, we're going to roll our own system and just simply write code in Python, versus maybe it's the data center team that has decided, we're going to coalesce around Ansible as our automation play. Or maybe it's the cloud infrastructure folks who say, hey, we've got robust APIs up here. We're going to leverage Terraform and just automatically build infrastructure that way. The reality is that every single team is focused on the act of automating, and they're all picking and choosing the set of tools that make sense for them, for their teams, and for their organization. And they should. I can't stress that part enough. They should. It is absolutely important that we don't restrict the options and capabilities that any one team or even the entire organization has. They chose those tools for good reasons. They're fluent in those tools. They like those tools. Those tools achieve the function they're trying to achieve. So we don't ever want to impede that progress. What we want to do is we want to work with it, right? We want to focus on how we bring it all together. And we do it at enterprise scale, meaning that we've wrapped it around in a secure way. We put some guardrails around this thing so that organizations can feel safe that the network engineer who just wrote a script to perform a change can't accidentally introduce more problems in the network because they didn't think about how to write the script securely. Or the cloud engineer who's just developed the latest and greatest Terraform module and put a plan around it, and everything is fantastic. But how do I share that now with the rest of the organization and share it in a way that I get auditing, I get logging, right? So it's all of that functionality that wraps around the system that really allows organizations to start that transition from being focused on the act of automating to delivering a enterprise-wide scalable automation system. And when you do that, you start to see this very interesting pattern start to emerge. In fact, we're seeing this with a lot of our customers right now, because we can begin to expand the sphere of what automation is all about. Because automation isn't just about the change. We can actually automate everything that has to happen before we actually make that change, whether that's getting information out of IPAMs, whether that's doing some pre-checks on the network. Maybe that's running some commands against devices and validating interfaces are up or routing tables are converged, or whether that's backing up the config of the device, so we have a way to roll back if that change, and inevitably they do, right, go bad. So we can start to automate all of that. Conversely, on the other side of the change, we can perform the same post-check validations. The infamous network ready for use actions. We can start to do that. We can validate that network services and applications have normalized. Whether that's performing pings and trace routes, whether that's validating that networking, routing tables or MAC tables have all reconverged back to a normalized state. Whether that's comparing the pre-check value with a post-check value and ensure that it's changed or it hasn't changed. We're able to actually automate all of that today and do it in a way that becomes very accessible to networking professionals without asking them to drop down and learn how to leverage Vim or understand what make tools are or how to start a Python interpreter or how to write code or what a function or a class or any of that is. We can take all of that off the table, but yet we can still take advantage of all this functionality. In essence, we like to talk about this as ticket-to-ticket automation. We can start from the day the request is made. I'm a user. I want to perform some function. I need connectivity to the cloud. And that's going to invoke a network change. And we can kind of pass that through this. And we can take automation all the way to the very end and actually close out that ticket and leverage automation for everything. So what happens here? The reality is that when you start to think about it in these terms, and you start to really dive into what's going on, there's a lot going on here. I mean, Rich, you know this. You've done quite a bit of this yourself, right?
Yeah, I've been the unfortunate victim of a lot of this.
there's a lot of moving parts here, and any one of them can actually cause a chain reaction, right? If I don't get my system if I don't do my pre-checks properly, I can't complete my configuration change. Therefore, I'm never getting to the post-check and my tickets, and now I got to schedule a second maintenance one, and it just becomes this crazy mess of a problem of this chain reaction. And so when I start to leverage automation, and I start to bring all of these manual or what have been manual processes, into the fold, I'm now able to actually start to achieve enterprise scale automation. And that's what this is all about. In addition to that, when you start to think about the process that's unfolding, if you will, you start to think about all the pieces and parts that are going on, it's typically not one person that's doing these things. In fact, I would venture to say in most enterprises, it's definitely not one person doing these things. It's individual teams that all have to come together, whether it's the database administrator that manages the inventory system, or the network engineer that happens to be responsible for the IPAM system, or the operations team, or the NOC, if you will, that manages the monitoring and element management capabilities. There are a whole set of individuals and teams that have to all come together to ultimately realize one of these changes. One of the unique values of Itential is the fact that we can help bring all of those teams together. And we can do it in a way that allows them, as I said earlier, to continue to use the tools that they've always used today, whether they've coalesced around Ansible or Terraform or custom development, or they're brand new to this and they've just got API enabled devices. We can help bring an umbrella over the top of that and build workflows that focus on creating that change, automating that change, and doing it from the day a user opens a ticket to the day that we respond to that user to tell them their change is actually completed. But it's one thing for me to just sit here and talk about it. I'm in product management. That's what I'm really good at this part of it. But honestly, I'm also an engineer at heart, and that's what my background is. I think it's much more impactful when we start to see, some of this happening. So, I'm going to actually turn the call over to Rich now and let him, let's just take a look at this, in reality.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Peter. Yeah, so in the demo, we're gonna talk about and we're gonna show you exactly what Peter was going over today. And you made some really good points about looking at automation from the practitioner's point of view. Like that little green circle was their whole world. How do I automate that change? And what is the right tool to do that? And sometimes that tool seems to be everything I absolutely need. But when we step back and look at the journey or the process of automation, you're really only taking advantage of one small thing. That's kind of like that box in the middle here. And in order to scale this thing out, you really need to have a lot more added to it. And doing that strictly in code is very difficult, right? It takes the network practitioner away from what they love to do, which is do network things, and into a world of writing code and managing and things like that. So, what we want to show today is we know a lot of people out there already have their Ansible playbooks and they have their scripts and things like that. And so, how we can take you from where you're at today and get you all the way to a point using our platform to where you can see this reality of a true ticket to ticket experience with automation that you are part of, that you are in charge of, that you understand. And that's the goal of the demo today. So, let me swap over to my screen here. And there we go. So I'm going to start our journey here with the automation gateway. Now, there's a lot the automation gateway can do. I've probably spent an hour in a webinar talking about it. The most important function here, though, is relating it back to where everybody has their particular automation assets and how they're using the right tool for the right job. And this is a way to not just organize them within this application, but to make them available. So whether people are using Ansible, Terraform, they're leveraging all kinds of different methodologies for managing their part of infrastructure. In this case, we can onboard them all. And I'm going to take a look at scripts because that's what we're going to use here. And here's one that we've onboarded, brought into the platform, and now we can actually take a look at this. Well, that's helpful, right? And you can see that we've lovingly swiped this from Cisco DevNet, which is a great example. So I suspect this is living on the directories of many network practitioners out there. So if I look at the script, that's helpful. Now other people can see it. But from our perspective, how do we go beyond just looking at it and executing it, in this environment? Well, the first thing is, and I think this hits upon a big part, Peter, is the concept of data manipulation as a day-to-day thing that everybody does, right? So you mentioned, hey, you have Cisco, you have Juniper. If I want to do like an ACL or a firewall or an ACL on a Cisco device and on a Juniper device, as a network practitioner, I'm doing data manipulation. I'm translating the ACL rules at its foundational level to the format that the Cisco device needs, to the format that the Juniper device needs in Junos, right? We do that every single day. And so one of the concepts here is this is no different. So if I'm running a command line program, right, this Python script, I need to feed it a certain amount of data in the format it wants it. And when we bring something on board into the to automation gateway, we have the opportunity to do something called decorating it. And all decorating is we're defining a JSON schema. Don't let that scare you. It's a standardized format where we can now define the correct inputs in the correct order that these particular scripts need. Again, this is nothing different if you're running it on the command line. These are the arguments that you would pass to it. So now we're codifying that in a sense and putting that into a way that's easy to understand, and more importantly, makes this more of a programmatic step in a greater automation process. So once that's defined, now you see that I have a very developed and defined and described set of inputs that we can pass on here. And one of the things that you said earlier was um, errors, right? Typing in errors. All of us pride ourselves in the networking world how quickly we can do CLI changes, but we still make errors. And how do we avoid those errors? By standardizing through these kind of methodologies, especially JSON, we can do validation and verification of input in a very simple way. And we can build this out so that when we're scaling it, we're adding more and more guardrails at every level so that we can have trust and confidence in these automations. So once I've defined this decoration for this particular Python script that's going to run from here, that immediately makes it available in our automation studio part of our platform. And now I can start using it as a task in a greater workflow. So I want to kind of stop here and describe what we're looking at. Um, how do we get information into this particular script? Well, if I was running it for the command line, I would pass it in the command line. But now we've just defined a structure to give that data, to feed that data into the script. So when I bring it into the automation studio, I can actually define a form that can be run. And just like a form that you fill out on a web page or anything else, we can quickly define a form, which is what I've done here. And that's my first step because I want to input some data from the user in order to pass it to that Python script. Just by doing the form itself, there's an amount of verification and validation. So, for instance, when we pop up this form in a minute, it's going to ask me for IP address and net mask. Well, it's actually checking in the form that that's just not a free form text field. It's actually checking that it's a dotted quad notation for an IP address. It doesn't know whether the IP address is right or wrong, but it is one level of validation of input to reduce errors. And we're going to continue to add on to that as we go on in the demo. So the second piece of this, and this is, I think, really, really important to understand, is this transformation. So this next step transforms. We call these transformations. And I want everybody to think about it as data coming in. This task transforms it so that it's applicable and in the right format for subsequent tasks in our workflow. And again, I draw on the analogy. This is something we do in our heads every day. I have data coming in for like I said, an ACL, and now I have to transform that into the format that's right for Cisco iOS, for Junos, for anything else that I might have to configure with that same set of rules, with that same set of data. So that's what transformations are. So what do they look like? Because this, I think, is often overlooked, and it's a very difficult thing to do in code. I would ask you, Peter, how easy is that to do, and especially at scale?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great point. You're absolutely right. This gets to be uh tedious would be putting it politely, right? Being able to do some of this. And it's not fun, and it involves, again, a mastery of development, which,
Yes.
as I think, most network engineers, much like myself, aren't not really in tune to wanting
Yeah,
to do.
exactly. So that's how we want to make it so that doing this data manipulation process is very simple and straightforward, doesn't require code, allows more than just a single person to see it, understand it, use it, update it, manage it, and that kind of thing. So what we're looking at simply here is this is the information that we're going to be getting from this form in a minute when I run this simple automation. It has to be reformatted in a way so that this script that we just onboarded and decorated in Python, remember that it's expecting certain inputs. So we have to, in a very simple way, just pull out certain data from the original form that we have. And then in this case here, this array, we're actually manipulating the data because it's coming out as a string. But in order for it to satisfy the input requirements for this particular script, it has to be turned into an array, even if it's a single element of array, because we can run this same Python script across multiple devices in one task. So it's asking for a list of systems to run this device or run this Python script on. So we're doing a little bit of data manipulation here, and that's the whole process. It's not that difficult to understand. I think we present it in a really unique and beneficial way. And if you actually look at trying to do this in code, it's not fun, it's not easy, and it basically becomes a job unto itself. So those are the two steps. What is the step that we're missing? Where's our Python script? So I can simply add this node here, and then let's see. Oh, let's see. Where did my task go? I seem to have lost my task, Peter. Let me do a reload here. Let's see if we can get it to come back. Okay, there we go. Reload solves everything. All right, so
Reload
this is our
everything.
script that we've onboarded in an automation gateway. It's the exact same script. And so now, how do I tell this particular task now to use the variables that are going to be input from this form? And it's a very simple thing. So once I have my data, my transformation that manipulates the data into the right form, instead of statically assigning all these fields, because if you look at it very very closely, these are the fields we defined as the inputs that are required for that Python script. So instead of statically assigning them like we would on the command line, I can just now reference this transformation task called format data, and it's going to provide all of the information in the right format that I need. And this is what's so powerful about getting started in our platform, is the ability to do this. And these things are reusable. They're part, you'll find in our pre-built library, we have a lot of these transformations, and this is a very powerful thing to make it very quick and easy to uh, to start using these scripts. So what I'm going to do is just finish out. Oops, I'm going to finish out choosing all the right inputs here for description. Now for IP address and netmask. Done. Save it. Run it. So the first thing that's going to happen. So we're going to view the job. The first thing that's going to happen is it's going to ask us to fill out a form. So it's going to stop. It's pausing right now so that I can pop up this task. And this is the form that we built within this platform. Very easy. It's drag and drop. It's very simple. This provides me the ability to do some data validation. Here's a drop down. I pre-populated this field with only systems that need to be that this particular script need to run on. So there's a form of some guardrails right there. That could have been dynamically populated as well based off of inventory that we have that the system knows about. I can pre-populate these fields. So I've already put in the loopback interface for the ease of the demo to make it quick. But these can be pre-populated with things so that we can reduce errors. And again, I talked about these two fields aren't free form. They're actually doing some syntax checking to make sure it's a dotted quad notation for IP address and netmask. So in this case, I can just run it, and then we'll see the rest of this run. So it's going to go through that transformation task. It's going to turn it into inputs, all that form data into inputs that can be used for the shell script. And now that shell script's going to dutifully do the thing it does well. It's just going to make the change on the device. And it's just as simple as that, right? Is that enterprise scalable? Or do we need to add more to this?
I
What
think
are we
we do.
missing here? Going back to one of the slides with all the people and all the work. We need a little bit more. So let's take a look at that next step. But I want people to recognize that getting that right script that you have into the platform, and just doing something as simple in 3 steps already provides benefit in input validation and error checking just by itself, right? But that's certainly not enough. Um, so we want to go that next step. So that would in this case, I've got a demo 2 that takes us down to the next step. So let me start at where the heart and soul of this was the script, right? So what are we missing? Well, the script in of itself, and even the form data, they don't understand necessarily. Like the form data doesn't understand if that's the right IP address. It just knows that the format was right. So we need to have some other methods of checking so that we can have confidence built around this. And one of the things that's not in here is operational information. So every network engineer, so if this script makes an interface, a loopback interface on the device, every network engineer knows in their head, maybe it's a reflex at this point, and it's subconscious, but they know that there are certain operational things that have to exist or should exist before I make a change to a device. So Peter, I'm going to test you. Sorry. I'm about to make a change. I'm about to add a loopback to a Cisco iOS device. What should I do first in order as a pre-check condition that makes it easy for me? Well, I won't say easy, but it gives me some confidence that I can safely add this thing.
Well, I certainly would want to check and see if the loopback is there, and I also want to check.
so so when I just ran that script earlier, it didn't do that. So if that loopback existed, right, it would have just clobbered it with potentially new IP address, net mask, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And if it was already there, what does that mean? It may have been in use. That's the thing. Nothing halts a change so quickly as when something already exists that's already there, right? That you don't expect it to be there. So if I'm about to make a change or create an interface and I assume it's not in use and I see there's live data on or as IP address, I go, whoa, wait a minute. Maybe I need to stop. Maybe I need to take a look at what's going on because it didn't fit the criteria that I expected. And that's what we're talking about. Pre-check conditions are part of, and post-check conditions are part of every network engineer's process of making a change. And we're really good at it. But in order to do like scalable enterprise automation, it needs to be put in the automation. In order to do that, it needs to be easy. So how do we collect that information that's just subconscious in somebody's mind? They could just do this, easily. How do we do that and make it easy without writing code? Because again, this is another process that could be very difficult to write in code. So one of the many tools we have here is something called a command template. Let's see, let me reload that. What a command template is simply the ability for a network engineer to take what's in their head and immediately in CLI language and immediately apply it to run those commands as part of a task and parse the output so that it fits the requirements that they expect. So in the case of you correctly answered that loopback interface probably shouldn't be there before I go and reconfigure it. So what would I do? I would, first of all, I would have to find out where the machine was. I'd have to SSH into it with the right credentials. I don't want to overlook that piece. But then once I'm on, what would I do? I would do a show interface for that particular loopback. So that's exactly what we're doing here. Show interface. And now we've put a variable called interface name. So where does that variable come from? It comes from our form, right? Because I put loopback 301 in there, gets transformed by that transformation step into a piece of data now that I can use in this pre-check. So now that's going to be filled in automatically when we run this because it's referencing that variable that went through that transformation. And now when I run this, it's going to put an output to the screen that every network engineer knows. We look at the very top and we say we look for loopback, interface loopback, whatever it is it up, right? So if it doesn't exist, if it doesn't exist, that's ideal. If it does exist, I need to put the brakes on the automation. I don't need to make any changes until I figure out what's going on. So that's what this is doing here. The output of this is being parsed for this string. So loopback 301 is up. If it's up, that means I can't do anything. So what I'm checking for is that it doesn't contain that in the output. In fact, the Cisco router to go, I don't know what loopback 301 is. That's exactly what I want. I want it to not tell me that it's up. Anything that tells me it's up, then I need to stop. And that's really in the most simplest form of what this does. So the cool thing about it is I can actually test this right from here. So talking about getting network and practitioners up to speed with the right tools where they can start working on this immediately. imagine the immense benefits of them being able to take what's in their head, quickly turn it into tasks that kind of bookend the change, and now you've taken the next step in building confidence that these automations can run safely. Because I would argue it's not just about running them quickly, but running them, not at the expense of safety and confidence as well. And so here's something that's really nice. I can test this right from here. So I can specify this is the router I'm going to make that I want to test this on. Because the interface name is a variable, I can do this. And remember, we already created that interface in the first demo. So it should actually fail this rule, because this is what would cause me to to put the brakes on. And so this is actually doing exactly what we talked about. It's going into the machine. It's going into the router. It's executing that show interface command for loopback 301. It's pulling the data back. It's parsing it for this, and we can see the summary that this command number one failed. Why? Because we did get a match for loopback 301 is up, because our script that we just ran did exactly what it was told to do. It just made the interface. So these are the guardrails we have to start to put in. Now that's a pre-check. What's kind of cool is that a post-check is very similar, except this is after the change is made. So now operationally, how do I know that when that script executed? I mean, we're going to test, the script. We have the ability to test the script itself and get success and failure. But then operationally, how do we know? Just because something says it was up doesn't actually necessarily mean it's up. The loopback can be up, but what if it has the wrong IP address? Then the service that it's tied to is not going to work right. So in this case, we can take the exact same idea, show interface, but now our expectation is that the interface should be up. And not only that, because we've parsed the information of the IP address out of that form, now we can reference that as a variable that's been transformed and turned into something we can use in subsequent tasks, and check for that, so that that same output must now contain loopback 301 is up and the IP address, because that's going to be presented in the data as well. If you look back here at this output, that's what we're looking for. Loopback is up, and then the IP address the correct IP address is assigned that we gave it in the form. And so that's our pre-check and post-check conditions. Now, these are just processes. We've simplified this. Many of our customers have, a lot of different criteria that they're looking at. Could be across different systems and that kind of thing. So, but to show very quickly how just bringing your automation in and then doing something like this, that a network engineer can sit down and now start to transcribe what's in his head into a simple template like that, becomes a really, really powerful piece of scaling that automation and doing it safely. So that's what's going on with the pre-check condition, running that template, and then making a decision based off of that. If the loop back is up, then we roll back from the pre-check. If it's not, here's a clever one, Peter. How many times before we even make the simplest network change are we sure that there's a backup configuration done?
Oh, heck no. I don't need a backup. Come on.
What could possibly go
What
wrong?
could possibly go
This is such a simple change, and that's the greatest insurance policy we could ever have, is a backup config immediately before anything changes, and yet that's so overlooked. So in this case, I push this as part of the pre-check condition. Let's always make a backup, just as a I mean, that's just best practice. And I know it's tedious, right? Because if I was doing this manually, what is the IP address of our server, and what were the credentials again, and what was the command, because I'm in 5 different things at all the time and I don't remember how to easily push this thing out. Having a single step, which is part of the platform, to back up a device in any device that's onboarded into the system, makes this very simple. And again, confidence and security. Actually running the script, just like we did in the last step, running the post check condition to ensure that the interface is up and that it's got the right IP address. And of course, if there's a post check condition that fails, the ability to have a robust way of rolling back from that could actually include the backup configuration that we made, that step before. And so that's just adding that in. So I added a little bonus in here at the very beginning too. Um, we talked about all the adjacent systems that network teams have to work with all the time. One of them is source of truth, right? So we see a lot of customers that have implemented source of truth specifically for IP address, host names, things like that, netbox or info blocks. The ability to bring those into this is huge, because it's not just, again, it's not just about the change. We want the change, but we want to automate those pre-check and post-check conditions. And then we want to be able to say, okay, where is this data coming from? We're talking about like reducing errors. Um, just like in our form, I could get the input from an IP address, but the form doesn't know that the IP address is right or wrong. Who does? Who's the source of truth for that? Well, in this case, it's Netbox. Netbox is going to allocate the next IP address that can be used for this condition, and we can integrate that into this very straightforward workflow. And that not only ensures that we have the right IP address, but then also saves a tremendous amount of time, so that Peter doesn't have to build his 360-degree desk with all his monitors and then figure out how to get in the middle of it.
Indeed.
So I'm going to run this as is, and it's not going to make the interface. Why? Because we made it in step 1. And the other thing I want to notice here is there's no IP address or net mask it's being asked for. In step 1, we asked for that. Why? Because now we're resolving that through the source of truth for all IP addresses. So integrating that along with the pre-check and post-check, this gives us a great idea of why these things are so beneficial as far as building safety into these workflows. So now we're running the pre-check. So we pulled the IP address from here. I've got another transformation. The JST is a transformation task that takes that information and then parses it and gives us that new IP address that came from the Netbox. So Netbox just gave us this IP address as the authoritative source. So I don't have to overwrite somebody's IP address or make a mistake. That's pretty cool. We ran the pre-check, it's completed, but what did it decide? It decided, let me refresh here so you can actually see the path that it's taken. It's decided, because the loopback already existed, because of that command template we put as a pre-check condition, that loopback already existed. It's not going to make the change. It's not going to update it. So now it goes back to its rollback procedure and then goes to end. And so just putting those things into the guardrail adds so much safety and so much time, especially downtime, especially having to correct errors. Just being able to do those 2 steps really broadens out the view of what can be done outside of the change, and not only what can be done, but why you want to do it. And this puts it back in the hands of the network practitioner, who really has the knowledge to put these to put these things into practice correctly, without kind of burdening them with the need to write a lot of code. So does that make sense so far, Peter?
It does. It makes a
Okay.
ton of sense.
Okay. So how do we go beyond this? Is this the end of the journey? Absolutely not. One of the things that you and I both talk about is the whole concept of ticket to ticket.
Mhm.
And as we talk to practitioners, it becomes very obvious how much time they spend in the ticketing system of their organization's choice.
Indeed.
Unfortunately, that's probably across all of IT infrastructure. Everything needs to be documented. Everything needs to be approved, and so we want to be able to get our customers who from that's one script building onto it. We'll show them the journey step by step. If I could do the integration with Netbox, well, why can't I do the integration with my ticketing system? Why can't I do integration? And I can. The way we do it is pretty amazing how easy we make it to integrate with any IT system through APIs. We're definitely an API first. We make it very simple and easy for customers to go to our pre-built library and pull an adapter that already exists. But even better than that, giving them the ability to generate an integration on the fly with an API specification like OpenAPI or Swagger or Postman collection. That is powerful, because again, it allows them to choose the right tools for ticketing, for IPAM, for all of those things. Most of those, especially if they're cloud driven, APIs table stakes. So now you're not limited by, well, do we have a library for that? Does our vendor have an integration to these things? They may or may not. Does it cost us money? All these things, we don't believe that this is something that should shackle you down from automating across end to end, ticket to ticket. So we want to make that really easy for you. So not only easy for a practitioner to get going, but then easy to build and flexible enough to integrate all of your systems. So the whole idea of the right tool for the right job is not just a, within the sphere of change, in my particular domain. Like I like Ansible, I like Python. Actually, this broadens out automation to the entire IT infrastructure and being able to integrate all that easily, making sure that they can pick the right tools for their business. So, that being said, let's go on. Part three. So, we've taken everything we've done in part two, and now we've added some very clever things, right? So, ticketing system is always a big deal. ServiceNow, we do a lot of work with our customers. That's one of the big systems. Do you integrate with ServiceNow? Oh boy, do we? Yes, we do. Absolutely. It's almost a pattern now. It's like I want to do the network change. I want to build the guardrails around it. Then I want to integrate with my source of truth. And then can we also do ServiceNow and some sort of notification? One team uses Slack, one team uses Teams. Maybe you need to send an email. We have pre-built for all of that because it happens so often. And so we always say, automations around, like, how do we integrate ticketing? How do we do notification? How do we do the actual implementation with guardrails and then the actual change itself? That becomes like table stakes for us. And I think that's difficult for a lot of other solutions, especially if you're do it yourself, with scripts and code. But for us, this is what we do every single day. So what I've done here is I've added a couple of things. So same form, we're also going to get an IP address. Now I've added a another thing here where I call merge network data, because even in the last step, we're getting some data from this form. We're getting some data, the IP address and netmask we're getting from Netbox. So we need to merge that data together and put it in a format that the rest of this workflow can use. And now, since we're also integrating into ServiceNow, ServiceNow has a set of inputs when you open a ticket. It says, we require this amount of information. When you set the description up, we require this amount of information formatted in this very specific way, dictated by the APIs. So that's what these transformation tasks do. They help us to pull information out of one section, modify it, put it in the right format for another step subsequent down the automation workflow. So now we've added that in order to support ServiceNow. When ServiceNow comes back, it's going to stick out. It's going to spit out a ticket ID. Like, here's your unique ticket ID. You're going to need that. Why? When you close the ticket. So we need that programmatically. So we can capture that with another transformation, and that data becomes useful in other things. Like in Teams, we're going to spit out a link to where I can single click to see where this ticket is open in ServiceNow. And then we're going to do something very clever. How long does it take to make a network change? It's a trick question, I think. Like, depends. Do I have to go through an approval system or not? Because I can make a change very quick, but I have to make a change that goes through a complex approval system. How long can that take? Hours, minutes, days? I mean, some of our customers say weeks. I'm going to show you in this workflow how we can expedite that within the framework of ServiceNow approvals. So, and this maybe is the more complex case. In the more simple case, there may be a series of changes that you can make very quickly. And so maybe it's as simple as opening a ticket, documenting the ticket, closing the ticket. But in other more complex cases, it might go through several levels of ServiceNow approval, and managing your tickets to see when they're approved can cost time itself. So we'll show you how we can sit there and see the status of a ticket and then execute once we've gotten approval. And then it just goes down and does exactly what we did in the last section with our guardrails, our command templates, and all that, and then finally closes the ticket out. So thus saving even more time. And so that's the full breadth of the concept. So let's go ahead and see it run. So when I start, the first thing it's going to do is take me to Job Manager and ask me to input some information. Because we've already created loopback 301, I'm going to assign this loopback 302, which I'm fairly certain doesn't exist. And then I'm just going to confirm it's, again, going to get an IP address from the Netbox, merge that data together. Now it's opening up the request in ServiceNow and going into Teams. Now it's sitting here and waiting for CR approval. So that happened really quick. So let me step you through this. Got the information formatted in a way that was necessary so that it could first spit out a new message in our Microsoft Teams channel for our notifications, right? So now I know I've just broadcast to my team, there's about to be a data center service request update with all the information, including the IP address we pulled from the NetBox system, the information we pulled, we entered into our form with the service and everything. And now I have a list of links that I can go to. We actually concurrently do Jira and ServiceNow, just for the sake of the demo, but we'll go to ServiceNow. So within ServiceNow, I can open this ticket. And one thing, let me flip back over here. It's sitting here waiting for approval. So now that workflow is just sitting there waiting for the approval process in ServiceNow to complete. So what does the approval process look like? Well, it's not fun, but it's necessary. And again, you can almost look at this as a guardrail, right? Process guardrail, yes, but it's a guardrail and it exists. And how do we optimize this to make it easy for network practitioners to reclaim more time, not have wasted time waiting for tickets or forgetting and managing when we manage our tickets, forgetting that those things have been approved. We start here. So I can request approval in our first step. So now we've moved to assess. Now this is saying, oh, ServiceNow is waiting for approval. So if I go to approvers, I can move this along. Of course, this would normally be multiple people at multiple times. So we're going to the next step, authorize. So again, another approval is required. And now Mr. Howard Johnson here is going to be our helper. He's going to approve this change. We've gone to the next step. Is this scheduled? Well, when would you like to schedule this, Peter? Right now? Sure. Why
Yeah,
not?
let's do it now.
Let's do it now. So as soon as I click this button, I've gotten the approval. It's been scheduled. Just for the sake of demo, as soon as I hit this button, this our workflow is going to move on. So I click implement, and now our workflow has been sitting here at the wait for CR approval, unless my screen is timed out here. Let me reload. Okay, so this is where we were. Wait for CR approval. I clicked that. It moved forward to now the pre-check. So we can actually go to visualize mode and we can see this. So it was sitting here, wait for CR approval. As soon as we hit implement, which meant go, we got the message. It's been approved. Implement scheduled now. Then now we're running through our normal process. We did the pre-check because we did loopback 302. It didn't exist, so it passed the pre-check condition. Now it's actually doing that all important backup your device configuration. That is the insurance policy. And now our script is running. It's going to go through the post-check condition to make sure operationally that loopback 302 exists and it has the right IP address. And then finally, when it finishes that, it's going to go down here to closing the ServiceNow ticket out. And once it finishes that task is completed. And I just I want to sit back and think, because we overlook how much time this really does save people. I mean, if I don't have to, if this is a kind of process that, I don't have to manage all these tickets all the time. If the automation can do this, because what we've done is we've said, hey, I can build an automation that I feel secure and confident in. I can build those pre-checks and post-checks. I can do the fallout conditions, and I can build that so that so that I'm confident running it. But now I can hook this into the to the bigger automation end-to-end ticket-to-ticket system, and even working within this. And of course, the next step might be to also launch the script. I mean, not the script, the automation that launches the script ultimately from ServiceNow itself, right? So it could be a catalog entry in ServiceNow. So we could do something like publish this, and it could be a catalog entry. So instead of me running it, somebody else is running it as a catalog so that they can provision infrastructure. Those are the steps of the journey that we want to get our customers to. And again, just to show this was our ticket. I update it. Our automation finished that last step and closed it out, so it's completed now. But yeah, ideally, that's the journey we want to take them on, and not only just to take them on the journey, but to show them they can do it at a practitioner level. You have a seat at this table. In fact, you are required, quite honestly, to be able to do these pre-checks and post-checks. Otherwise, how can we scale this? All we have is a script that just barrels through whatever you tell it to do. And that's not a scalable solution in any means, because we can't do it at the expense of of making sure we can do it securely and correctly.
So, Rich, this has been really great. I mean, really fantastic stuff. I think that this did a really kind of exemplified that point of how we go from focusing on just making the change to how we start to integrate all of the pieces and parts about that change, and then tie it to a beginning and end, so that we actually get a enterprise scalable, fully automated, deployable solution. And we do that leveraging really kind of all of Itential's product portfolio, right? Kind of starting with Gateway, as you showed, being able to decorate scripts and playbooks and whatnot, and then leveraging that decoration by uplifting it all the way into platform, where then we can take advantage of it from our workflows and plug them directly into our workflows as we interface with other types of systems that are providing APIs. And then the last part that we really didn't talk much about, but I think it is an absolute key to our entire portfolio, and that is this idea around pre-built collections. And pre-built collections being this thought that we can build bespoke workflows. Certainly not a problem. Everyone just watched Rich do it. But what about reuse? What about creating starting points? And that's what pre-built collections are all about. We have a whole library of these available to our customers that give you a starting point for building workflows, whether it's focused on performing a very specific task, or acting as kind of a starting point for you to build your own workflows on top of. Customers can pull in these pre-builts, and they can actually start to leverage them in their environments, and you don't have to start from a blank canvas. So that ends today's presentation. We do have a couple of QAs. We don't have a ton of time for it, but I do want to touch on a couple of them here before we shut down today's presentation. And one, Rich, I want to throw this one out to you for just a second.
Mhm.
So the question is, could you use ServiceNow to start this process?
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Yes, yes, you could, and ideally, like that's kind of the next step in the journey. I mean, we've done kind of longer demonstrations where that's the next thing, but absolutely, like we see that customers do, intend at some point to open these things up. But it's about building confidence in what you've already got to do the changes on the network before you really want to open that up. But yeah, in our platform, we make it really, really easy to publish these, completed automation workflows so that they can be leveraged and called through an API safely and securely through ServiceNow, or integrated into a CI/CD process, or any number of ways. And once it's accessible through an API, you can use it in any way you really want to around the enterprise organization.
yeah, that's fantastic. Another question we got here, and this is more geared towards Automation Gateway. What do I have to do differently when I write my scripts or my playbooks or my Terraform plans to make them work with Gateway?
Well, we took that one. The script that we took came straight up. I mean, we did some things with you know hiding authorization and things like that.
Hmm. Hmm.
But really, that's it. If you can look at a script, run a script, and understand what its necessary inputs are from the command line, really that step of decoration is just applying that to a JSON schema that we can show you examples of. In fact, that was an example of one. We kind of have some examples already built into it. Once you express those inputs correctly in the JSON schema, that's it. Really, there's no retooling of that script that's absolutely necessary. I mean, you could, potentially do some things if you wanted to make parsing output of a script easier, but quite honestly, you don't have to.
Okay, great. And then one other here came in around the change management process, and how what happens when a workflow is actually waiting for an approval. Does it wait indefinitely? Is it sitting there looping? Can you talk a little bit about kind of how that works?
Yeah, so you're not limited in any particular way with our system. Like, it's very flexible in the methodology that you can use. In this case of a demo, it is sitting there waiting in a loop, but it could have been, depending on the capabilities of the ticketing system. Ideally, a better way to scale that is to be told that the ticket's been approved, and there are ways to do that as well. Some of them take more interaction with like ServiceNow, because you have to turn certain things on. But in either way, we have customers doing it through whatever methodologies they need. We have some best practices around that as well. But in my simple case, yeah, I can sit there and wait, 10, 20 seconds to see if the status is updated. Again, just for the purpose of the demo, but it could be something as simple as that, or is more scalable as, event driven message bus, that kind of thing.
Fantastic. Well, that takes us right up to the top of the hour. We could probably there's quite a few more questions. We could probably spend the rest of the day doing this, and as much as I would love to, unfortunately, we all have to get back to our day jobs. But I will say that this presentation will ultimately be available from Itential.com. Come check us out. Take a look at all the goodness we've got there. If you want to get started with IAP with Itential Automation Platform, you can sign up for a free cloud account. It is a unencumbered opportunity to get started with everything that Itential Automation Platform brings, and you can start to work with it and not just take my word for it. Don't just take Rich's word for it. Do it for yourself and get experience with it. So with that, I'd like to say thank you for spending an hour with us. We've thoroughly enjoyed ourselves. Rich, it's been fantastic as always.
Thank you,
hanging out
Peter.
with you.
Thanks,
And
everyone.
we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.